Scriptards, beware. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels, demons, and monsters, and serpents, and Scriptards! Woo! To episode 61 of the Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed, high atop the Edwards Plateau. And,
what's up?
What's up? That's right. We are your hosts. I am Russ. This is my brother Kyle. And we are here to talk about a bunch of interesting things today, and we are going to be helped, as always, by our good friend, the Watcher, Mr. Brett England Longhead. How you doing out there, buddy?
Doing well, man. It's been a couple long, hard days out here in space, but I am locked in, loaded, ready to go. Psyched.
Yeah. All right.
You must be pretty far away because the lag seems long.
Shh, stop doxing our Longhead. You can't give them any clues.
Sorry about that.
All right, so what do we got for space news?
Weather is cold and vacuous. I keep forgetting to look up space news. I mean, space weather.
Space weather news. Yeah.
Space weather news. Oh, wait. I do have some news.
All right.
SUNPROBE.
SUNPROBE, that's right. SUNPROBE update.
SUNPROBE has lifted off.
All right.
Yeah, they actually they launched it. Don't remember what day.
Doesn't matter.
I did read in the news story that they were going to launch it, and the guy who it's named after, the probe is named after.
Sun?
Well, that's our name for it. Yeah. I can't remember. Man, I'm just totally unprepared for this story.
It's all right.
It's in this stack of stuff somewhere.
Yeah. So it launched on some day, and some guy said,
yeah, some guy who it's named after. He's like 80 years old. He's been down there in Florida, like it was supposed to launch, and then it didn't. Like something went wrong.
There was a solar flare
in the rocket, and they were like, "Whoa, hold up!"
Okay.
Like something was going on with the tanks or whatever.
Hold
leaking.
up!
Yeah,
wait a minute, something ain't right.
That's right. It's the Parker Solar Probe.
All right,
That's
cool.
right. Parker. So Parker was there, and I believe he was the guy that first theorized the solar wind, or is that? Am I way off there?
I don't know.
He was somebody who had a theory, and he was right. And so they named this SUNPROBE after him.
Okay.
But yeah, it didn't launch due to some problems, and it was looking pretty bad, but they were hopeful. And then I saw the next story where it launched.
All right.
So SUNPROBE is in space.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Headed towards the sun.
Yeah.
Should be
It's going to touch the sun.
should be relatively easy to hit.
That's right.
It's very large.
It's going to touch the sun from 4 million miles away.
Yeah. So all they have to do for this probe to go to the sun is it just needs to stop. And then it can fall.
That's right. That's right.
Shouldn't take a whole lot of delta V.
Yep. Fire the rockets to slow it down.
That's right.
Okay, among other terrestrial news stories, the laptop of a British UFO hunter was reportedly wiped clean before being handed back to his family after he mysteriously died.
And no one is surprised. Actually, I was surprised when I heard that. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, the sudden death of Max Spears, who was 39, has been shrouded in mystery after a friend discovered his body while he was on a trip to Poland to visit a conference. There was some report that he vomited black blood or something a couple times before.
And he also had warned he sent something to his mother.
A message from his phone sent to his mother, Vanessa Bates, before he died, warned, quote, "Your boy's in trouble. If anything happens to me, investigate."
Yeah. In other words, I'm not going to commit suicide. Find out what happened to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, yeah. So this has been going on for a couple of years, I suppose, and they're finally getting an inquest, which I'm not really sure what that is, but
like an investigation into the
Yeah, and
investigation.
They're bringing all the people that have been involved and all this stuff to the inquest.
Yeah.
And the computer, his computer, which was confiscated by police in Poland, I suppose, or whatever, was finally returned to the family, and it was wiped.
Right. Yeah. They took it for the investigation of his death and sent it back to the family wiped. So, yeah.
Okay, going back to SUNPROBE news. Eugene Newman Parker is an American solar astrophysicist who, in the mid-1950s, developed the theory of the supersonic solar wind and predicted the Parker spiral shape of the solar magnetic field in the outer solar system. So that is why SUNPROBE is named after Parker.
Right.
Yeah, we are going to park that
And
SUNPROBE.
no one believed him at the time of his of him.
And now that all of his detractors are dead,
He has no one to gloat over. Shout out to J. Harlan Bretz.
Okay, so another mystery. In a town in Australia, population 11, a man and his dog have mysteriously disappeared.
Wait, was the dog one of the 11?
No.
Okay.
No.
Just checking.
Population of dogs is much higher. But yeah, like I thought you would like this story because it's, you know, it's kind of like the guy and his dog vanished without a
Right.
trace.
Yes,
There's no sign of him, and like the last person to see him, he leaves and he goes home, and then the townspeople don't see him at the coffee shop or whatever, the normal drinkery or whatever they
Yeah.
hang out. The
Yeah.
next couple of days, and then somebody eventually goes and checks on him, and there's no one in his house, and the doors are unlocked, and he's gone, and his dog is gone, and there's no trace, and
Right.
whatever.
Did it say anything in there about, did he take his vehicle? Did he leave his
No.
wallet or his phone? Doesn't say that. Doesn't have any of those details.
No, it went all straight to the drama, right? It was
Right.
like
all 10 people
all the other 10 people in
are
the town
blaming every other 10 person.
Oh, hey, Billy was, he was the one who did it. You know?
Yeah.
I saw him have a fight. It's basically, it's all about the different townspeople like blaming each other.
Yeah.
They're all suspicious of each other.
Yeah.
It's terrible to laugh at it, but anyway, keep that one on the radar.
Yeah. I wonder if Pilatus is looking at that one
Yeah, basically, he's out in the middle of nowhere already.
already.
In a town of 11 people in Australia.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that is interesting. Like, people going missing with animals is fascinating. Now, it has been, like, there have been cases where, you know, if a person injures themselves or even dies, that the dog will stay with their body for a while before returning. So there's a good chance that the dog will show up like several weeks later.
I see. Yeah.
A lot of times in the missing 411 stuff, the dog eventually shows back up unharmed and sometimes having apparently been fed, or cared for, not looking like it stayed out in the bush for weeks, basically is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I'm not making a prediction, but I'm saying that.
Wait a minute. I missed this detail.
What?
December 16th, 2017.
Okay. So it's an old story.
It's an old story.
That's okay.
So
No new developments since
yeah,
then.
I guess not.
That's
The guy's
interesting.
gone. Unless I fell asleep reading this article, and at the end they were like, "But he was found with his dog." But no, another interesting thing about this is like the guy's name is Moriarty, and
Was he a professor?
the little hotel bar that they hung out at was called the Pink Panther. And I was like, "Wait a minute,
Wow.
I'm confused."
Is this story even real?
Yeah. He went to the Pink Panther, the only hotel and bar in this tiny, dusty town, to end the day with his usual round of drinks. He downed 8 beers, typical for Mr. Moriarty, a laborer who spent most of his life in Australia's rugged outback. Then he left home with his dog by his side. He was never seen again. Neither was his dog, a Kelpie named Kelly.
Okay, so they're writing this in 2017?
I don't know.
Or did the disappearance happen in 2017 and they're writing this now?
Maybe they're writing it now. 4 days later, when the police arrived in
Holy crap.
that's how long it takes to get there from the outback.
When anything happens, when seconds count, the police are only 4 days away. Good grief.
So it's in Larima, a Northern Territory town of just 11 people. They entered into Moriarty's unlocked house to find a cowboy hat on a cooler box and a barbecue chicken still in the microwave.
Yep.
The authorities suspect foul play and have been treating the case as a homicide, with every single person in Larima, all 11 of them, being probed for clues. Topping the list of potential suspects now, at least going by the questioning in a recent inquest involving the town's residents, are a former Pink Panther bartender who was one of the last people to see the missing man, and a gardener with whom Mr. Moriarty had fought just days before his disappearance. Detectives have also questioned the owner of a roadside tea house, leading to morbid jokes about the filling in her meat pies.
Good grief.
Yeah, it's like... anyway, there's no clear evidence.
Note to self, do not murder anybody in a town with only 11 people.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy to go through the suspects.
Yeah. Anyway, that's
Still,
a strange one.
The dog is difficult. Like, when you murder somebody, how do you kill the dog?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I don't know. I guess you could, but that doesn't seem like a likely crime of passion. You know what I mean? Being able to disappear the dog as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So they never found him. I just went to the end of the story. I remember this.
They still haven't found him. Yeah.
But I didn't catch that. Well, I mean, that was the first line of the story. So I guess I just, by the time I got to the end and heard all the drama, I was like, forgot that it was like in December last year. Anyway. So put that one on the old missing 411.
Yeah.
It was the town crocodile. That's the Watcher's theory. It's the town croc. Oh, yeah. And I don't know about this story. It's probably fake news. But
Let's hear it.
I just saw the headline. Egypt's second Sphinx found. And you read it, and it's about these guys doing work on a road, and they ran into something, and they uncovered it, and it's a Sphinx, and they don't tell you how big it is, and they don't show you any pictures, and they can't get it out of where it is. So, but they've excavated part of it, and it's got to be excavated correctly.
Yeah.
So they're encouraging tourists to come see it. And
course.
I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is
This is a tourism deal.
Yeah. And there's like what is that road that's just lined with sphinxes, right? There's just tons of sphinx carvings.
Yeah, it's not Karnak, it's a temple, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's got sphinxes on either side. I know there's other temples that have like rams.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on the age. Yeah.
So it's just seems retarded to call it the second sphinx.
Right.
It
implies that it's another enormous one like the one
Right.
on Giza. Yeah. They don't tell you where the road is.
Let's see. Oh, man. Accidentally dug up the renowned artifact during roadworks.
Yeah, so they don't tell you anything.
They probably do somewhere. I didn't plan on reading the whole story because it's basically just a big ploy to get people to come.
The Watcher says the Antiquities Department was not surprised, as they knew it was there, and were quoted as saying they were surprised it took this long for somebody else to find it.
So then they start telling you all about the Great Sphinx in the story.
Right.
And how awesome it is and everything. And you're just like, where are the pictures of this thing you found in the road? So, I don't know. It's a terrible story. And then I went and tried to find other examples of it, and there's a bunch of different ones on different news sites, and then there's one that's like second Sphinx found, and it's got the big old fake news stamp on the top of it. There's an image, big old stamp on it.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's what it looks like to me.
Someone can't count. There are lots of sphinxes in Egypt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But seems like their tourism has been down due to unease and terrorism. And they're suddenly finding all kinds of stuff. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. Yeah. Stay away, tourists, so that Egypt keeps finding shit.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah, they it's pretty typical. They only let exploratory work go when they're not getting any tourism.
Business is bad, yeah.
Yeah.
That could be a really simple way to explain the conspiracy. Like, they don't want any new discoveries while tourism is good.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they'll only stomach new discoveries when tourism is bad, is how I would put it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That leaves room for a little deeper conspiracy.
That's right. Which there totally is.
That's all I got for the news right now. It's been a slow news week, folks.
Yeah. Yeah, there's other stuff, but I was looking at it and I'm just like, this is not something I want to talk about. But there is one that I did want to talk about. This is not news, but this is an interesting. Have we ever talked about Coral Castle on this show? Like briefly, I know we've mentioned it. We've never gone into it.
Detail on that.
Yeah. So I've got this from Mysterious Universe, the odd case of the mysterious Coral Castle. Okay. There are numerous anomalous constructions throughout the world that have managed to remain enigmatic and perplex us since time unremembered. The pyramids, Stonehenge, and many others like these have long incited speculation, debate, and countless conspiracy theories. Such mysterious constructions are not merely a feature of the ancient world, and indeed one of the oddest cases of an anomalous structure that no one can figure out comes to us from the modern day, when an eccentric loner managed to single-handedly build one of the most puzzling engineering mysteries of our time. The whole strange story begins with a man named Edward Leedskalnin, who was born in the country of Lativa in 1887. Brought up in a dirt-poor family, Leedskalnin was rather uneducated, only ever achieving the equivalent of around a fourth-grade education, and this may have been one of the reasons that the girl he planned to marry and start a life with had suddenly up and dumped him. By all accounts, this devastated the then 26-year-old man.
She just found out that he only had a fourth grade
Wait, you only have a fourth-grade education? Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
By all accounts, and this is not, none of this is really known either. By all accounts, this devastated the then 26-year-old man who, in dejection, decided to leave everything behind and start a new life in the United States in the early 1920s. His first destination was the town of Reedsport, Oregon, in the Pacific Northwest. But the cold weather did not agree with him, and he also came down with a case of tuberculosis while he was there. At this time, his eccentricity would start to show, as he would claim that he made a full recovery.
Latvia.
We are being corrected.
Oh, okay. I said it wrong. I knew it when I read it. I was like, I'm probably saying this wrong. Let's see. At this time, his eccentricity would start to show, as he would claim that he made a full recovery from the disease by using magnets to stimulate his immune system and banish the sickness.
Heck yeah.
I like him already. Seeking a warmer climate and happier times, Leedskalnin would then move to Florida City in Miami-Dade County in Florida, where he would buy a remote, undeveloped plot of land to call home. And it was here that he would begin an ambitious project that he would at first call the Rock Gate. It was a project that was to last 28 years and go on to become one of the most bizarre architectural conundrums in the world. Over the course of the next few decades, Leedskalnin slowly but surely meticulously erected an intricate structure composed of over 1,100 tons of oolite limestone, which he quarried and moved all by himself without any help. Puzzlingly, the epic slabs of stone that comprise the structure are on average 14 tons each, with some weighing up to 27 tons, all of which were precisely and seamlessly connected without the use of any sort of cement or mortar. And the whole thing surrounded by sheer rock walls 8 feet high, with 2 monoliths erected of towering stones measuring 25 feet tall each.
Dang.
The strange part is that Leedskalnin did all the quarrying, the carving, and the moving of the stones completely by himself, often in the dead of night when no one was around to watch him, and he always stopped if anyone did come around. He was also not a large man, standing only 5 feet tall and weighing around 100 pounds, and with his fourth-grade education, no one could figure out how the hell he was doing it. Things got even more impressive when his sprawling construction was interrupted by the building of a subdivision nearby. A recluse who loved nothing better than his privacy, instead of putting up with the troublesome intrusion, Leedskalnin instead opted to have the whole thing moved piece by piece to Homestead, Florida, a full 10 miles away. To do this, he used a friend's truck, but at no point did he have any help, and he worked alone. So he moved the entire thing that he constructed by himself using one dude's truck 10 miles off.
Obviously, his education did not stop at the 4th grade.
That's right. Education does not always require schools.
Yeah.
This relocation would take 3 years, after which the eccentric and secretive Leedskalnin commenced his obsessive construction of what he would go on to be called the Coral Castle with renewed vigor. By the time the vast and complex structure was finished, a full 28 years later, it was considered to be a modern architectural marvel. The whole castle was 2 stories high, featured living quarters and a throne room with enormous stone thrones, a sundial, a Polaris telescope, a 40-foot-high obelisk, turrets, towers, a water fountain, an expansive garden full of sculptures, and a 9-ton revolving gate standing 8 feet high and smooth enough in action that it was said that even a child could easily push it open.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
It is all meticulously crafted, virtually free of imperfections or chisel marks, and mostly comprised of immensely heavy stones that would be hard for a team of men with advanced equipment to move, let alone one tiny, uneducated man with only crude tools at his disposal. It is all a marvel of engineering that has managed to astound architects, engineers, and scientists to this day. It is this conundrum that has caused all the manner of rumors to spread as the odd man toiled away on his structure, and there were claims that he had mastered some sort of mystical reverse magnetism or similar such supernatural power that allowed him to actually levitate the gigantic rocks. This particular rumor was fueled by supposed sightings of Leedskalnin levitating massive slabs of stone as if they were balloons, or placing his hands on them and singing to them to make them lighter. All this sound familiar?
Yeah.
Although such stories are far from substantiated. Others believe that his property sat on a mysterious vortex or portal of some type, and that the blocks were actually teleported from place to place or subjected to anti-gravity forces. And yeah,
and then
sure.
he moved it 10 miles
and then he moved
away.
it to another portal some distance away. Or vortex, yeah. Sure. Portal! There has even been the theory posited in Ray Stoner's book, Ray Stoner, The Enigma of Coral Castle, that the real reason the castle was moved was to get a better position over some sort of Earth energy line, where he would be more readily able to harness these strange forces to move the large blocks with greater ease. For his part, Leedskalnin's own eccentric and cryptic claims about how he did not help matters. At times, he said that he could sense magnetic energy or mysterious Earth energies with him, implying that he could manipulate them, as well as to use them to reduce the gravitational pull of the Earth. On another occasion, he claimed that he had rediscovered the laws of weight, measurement, and leverage, and that he was in possession of an unknown device that he called a perpetual motion holder. He also was known to answer the question of how he made the castle with the cryptic statement, "It's not difficult if you know how," and he once boldly pronounced, "I have discovered the secrets of the pyramids, and have found out how the Egyptians and the ancient builders in Peru, Yucatan, and Asia, with only primitive tools, raised and set in place blocks of stone weighing many tons." Even listening to the man's own testimony, it is hard to figure out exactly what is going on. Of course, there are those who say that he had merely worked out a way to use complex leverage and pulley systems to help him in his endeavors, but how could he have done all this on his own without many resources, along with such a low level of education? No one knows. Who cares about his education?
No, you keep bringing that up.
As if you need, like, it's been shown over and over that academics can't move giant blocks. So, Edward Leedskalnin would never reveal how he
They
would
can
have done
build giant magnets.
Edward Leedskalnin would never reveal how he had done it, taking the secrets to the grave with him in 1951 when he suddenly died of a kidney infection to leave the speculation and rumors swirling, having never divulged exactly how he had pulled all this off single-handedly with only a few picks, winches, ropes, and pulleys. It is still not known exactly how this one man managed to accomplish this outrageous feat, and one example to illustrate just how impressive it all is was the moving of the intimidating enormous main gate in 1986. In order to move the gate so that it could be repaired, it required 6 men and a 45-ton crane, something that the mysterious Leedskalnin had done all on his own without any modern equipment. How? No one really knows. Some people just think it was hard work and ingenuity, with one building contractor named Orville Irwin claiming to have personally witnessed portions of the castle's construction and writing in his book, The Story of Coral Castle, thus, back in the days when Ed started carving out his original stones, his was a generation who knew the accomplishments by the sweat of the brow. It wasn't mysticism, but hard work. This is how Ed accomplished the massive project, which sounds just like typical, like, all you need is a million guys with ropes and you can do this. Yeah. this time they're just saying all you need is one guy with a rope and you can do this.
One guy with 1 million hours.
No matter what the answer may be, Edward Leedskalnin's Coral Castle has nevertheless gone on to confound scientists for decades and is often likened to the mystery of the construction of the pyramids or of Stonehenge. The castle itself was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1984 and can be viewed today as a tourist attraction. It may never be fully understood how or even why this one man made such a gigantic sprawling compound of heavy rocks, and it may just continue to be a mystery into the future, but whether it is due to magical powers, secret technology, or just pure grit, it is a fascinating and compelling tale all the same.
So is the place still?
Yeah, you can go see it in Florida. Yeah,
we need to go
Coral
there.
Castle. Yeah, it's awesome. Like here's a
Field snake.
yeah
trip.
field snake trip, snake fields. Here's a picture of the rock garden, the sculptures.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
there's no chisel marks. This is one thing that people don't talk about very often. Like, how did he even cut them?
Yeah. So they call it Coral Castle because of the type of limestone it is, or like what?
Yeah, because he was pulling up limestone that has a lot of coral in it.
Okay.
So, and yes, there's a theory that he had some kind of magnetic flywheel, but that's never been substantiated either.
What?
And how would a magnet pick up limestone?
I'm not sure. That's what I was going to ask.
Brett is showing us a picture of a single gear on blocks of wood. This is how he did it.
Yeah. And flywheel doesn't mean a wheel that flies. Sorry. It just means something that keeps the inertia going.
What you should do, though, is look up Ed Leedskalnin's
Black box.
He wrote a pamphlet on his theories about magnetism.
Oh.
So you read that, it's very fascinating. Like you have to ignore everything standard model that you know and read it and just see what he's trying to say, because it doesn't go with any of the standard model stuff anyway, which doesn't matter to us here as Snake Bros, but most people that read that are just like, this is, uneducated crap. But the guy obviously proved that he knew something.
Yeah.
And I don't know how a single guy can move
24-ton blocks.
Right.
I mean, come on.
And pick them way up high, because like the 27-ton blocks are ones that are like part of the castle part, which is like towers and shit. So I don't know how. And then he moved the entire thing by himself to a different location.
How do you even move a 24-ton block in a truck?
I know. How does a truck? It's a fascinating mystery. But you guys can look it up, Coral Castle. There's many beautiful pictures of it online, and the place is phenomenal. And the whole thing about the gate, they kind of skipped over the really interesting part of the gate, or at least the repair. So like in the article that I just read, they talked about how he set this gate and that a single child could open it, right? Which basically what that means is that the gate itself was a gigantic block of stone that had posts coming up off of the back edge, like one up and one going down, that basically were set into holes drilled into the frame of the door so that it swung. Okay, and it was
pivoted in the center.
And it was so perfectly balanced. That's what they meant. It was so perfectly balanced that it just took a touch of the fingers to make it swing open, and it operated beautifully. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever hung a door, but that shit's hard with the regular door, right? Making those hinges work perfectly. And to do this with a gigantic, like, multi-ton stone is amazing. And when they took the gate apart, they had all these people in this crane, but the hardest thing the problem that they had was not so much moving the giant blocks, because they had the crane and all these dudes. The hardest part was hanging a door again that would swing open easily. They couldn't do it. They were unable to do it. I don't remember what workaround they had to use, but they were unable to put the door back like he had it, because they couldn't hang it where it would open. Anytime they put it in there, it was just jammed, right? Most multi-ton blocks, you set some piece of it down something else and it just doesn't move. It's jammed. Like, they could not make it swing open again. So however this guy did it, he did know something, or maybe many somethings. I don't know. But yeah, Coral Castle.
That's awesome.
I love the fact that he told people, like, he's discovered the secret of the Egyptians. That's like, yes, dude, tell people that. Just blow their minds. How'd you do this? Well, I've discovered the secret of the Egyptians, implying that there is one.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to take a quick break, and we are going to come back for the second segment of the first hour and talk about another enigma that's more recent than ancient. But this one is a manuscript full of naked ladies.
Did a worm eat it?
No.
Okay.
But no one can read it, so it doesn't matter.
The worm ate all the best naked ladies.
Or maybe it was a snake.
Welcome back to National Public Snakes. Right now we are discussing very strange things, and Russ has another very strange thing to discuss on NP Snakes.
That's right, Kyle. This is going to be about the Voynich Manuscript. It's a very strange document from the 1500s.
Wow. Well, I'd love to hear about that, Russ.
All right. Well, I'm going to read this article from the New Yorker. They just wrote about it.
Great!
Man, that would be boring. All right.
NPS. National
NPS.
Public Snakes.
National Public Snakes.
We are totally funded privately, of course.
All right. So the Voynich Manuscript. Okay. I'm going to read this article about this. This is from the New Yorker. And I can only get 3 New Yorker articles for free every month. So this is one. I'm wasting it on you guys. Okay, here we go.
Hooray!
I'm probably never, ever going to read another New Yorker article ever again. But anyway. The word ink is a child of the Latin word incostum, which means having been burned. In the Middle Ages, people thought that ink burned its way into parchment because iron gall inks go into the page pale, then darken. This is not what's happening physically, but it makes sense as a metaphor. A medieval manuscript, because it was made by hand, is necessarily an original, even when it is a copy of something else. It cannot be standardized any more than a thing can be unburned. The Voynich manuscript is a special kind of original. We know, thanks to carbon dating, that it was put together in the early 15th century. But no living person has ever, as far as we know, understood it. No one can decode the language that the book is written in. It has no title and no author. A new facsimile, edited by Raymond Clemens and published by Yale University Press, draws attention to the way that we think about the truth now. The book invites guesses, conspiracy theory, spiritualism, and cryptography. The Voynich manuscript has charisma, and charisma has lately held a monopoly on our attentions. The manuscript is 225 millimeters tall, 160 wide, and 5 centimeters thick. Yale's new facsimile is somewhat larger, as it includes wide white margins for the amateur cryptographer's own marginalia. The manuscript's Renaissance-era cover, it was rebound, is made of what the Benke Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale calls a limp vellum. The book has resided at Yale's library since 1969. Turn the covers as Umberto Eco once did. It was the only book in Benke's famous collection that he cared to see. And you are greeted by writing in brown ink accompanied by strange diagrams and painting of plants. The writing will not be decipherable to you. The book was made in the ordinary medieval way, but the script, the form of its letters, the language itself, was apparently invented by whoever made it. Some call the language in its script Voynichese. The letters loop prettily, and the text runs from left to right, top to bottom, they think. The first half of the book is filled with drawings of plants. Scholars call this the herbal section. None of the plants appear to be real plants, although they are made from the usual stuff, green leaves, roots, and so on. Search a word like botanical in the British Library's illuminated manuscript catalog, and you'll find several texts that are similar to this part. Now, they don't say this in this article, but what's interesting about a lot of the plant diagrams is many of them appear to be hybrids. Like roots of a type of plant that are kind of recognizable are attached to the stem of another kind of plant that's sort of recognizable that has leaves of something else, like they're hybrids. Not all of them are like that, but
maybe it's the key to deciphering.
Right.
You know? Ha-ha! I have already discovered the answer.
The next section contains circular diagrams of the kind often found in medieval zodiacal texts. Scholars call this part astrological, which is generous. Next, the so-called balenological section shows nude ladies, in Clemens' words, in pools of liquid which are connected to one to one another via strange systems of tubular plumbing that often snakes around whole pages of text. These scenes resemble drawings in the alchemical tradition, which gave rise to a now debunked theory that the 13th century natural philosopher Roger Bacon wrote the book. Then we get to what appear to be instructions of the practical use of those plants from the beginning of the book, followed by pages that look roughly like recipes. Voynich is not a word from the book, but rather the name of an eccentric book dealer, Wilfrid Michael Voynich, who bought the manuscript in 1912. When Voynich purchased the text, it was accompanied by a letter by Johannes Marcus Marci, 1595 to 1667, of Prague, who claimed that the book had been, quote, sold to Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II at a reported price of 600 ducats. Ducats. Give me them ducats. And it was believed to be a work by Roger Bacon, unquote. Voynich would later say that the seller was the occult philosopher John Dee. Clemens points out that he was nudged toward this hypothesis by a historical novel. The book appears to have bounced around Prague for a while. In 1639, a person named Barchius described it as a certain riddle of the Sphinx, a piece of writing in unknown characters, and guessed that, quote, the whole thing is medical, unquote. The book's historical trail vanishes in 1670, up until the time that Voynich purchased it. Yale's new edition affords Voynich a profile by Arnold Hunt, which turns out to be warranted by his strong and odd personality. Voynich was born in 1864 in, I'm going to butcher this, Telsii, to a Polish family. He supposedly spoke 20 languages fluently. He was arrested in Kovno in 1885 for his membership in the Proletariat Party, a social revolutionary group, and sentenced without trial to exile in Siberia for 5 years. He got a lot of reading done there, and then he escaped, traveling wildly and ultimately bartering his waistcoat and glasses for a spot on a boat from Hamburg to England. There, he became part of the intellectual circle that surrounded the Russian agitator Sergei Krivshinsky, known as Stepniak. Once his adventurous days were over, Voynich became a book dealer, a good one, although he once accidentally, one hopes, sold a forgery to the British Museum. Voynich, in later life, would sometimes point dramatically to the wounds he had received on his youthful adventures. Hunt notes, he said, "Here I have sword, here I have sword, here I have bullet." Here I have sword, here I have bullet. In 1903, the Jesuits decided to sell a group of texts from the Collegio Romano collection to the Vatican. The sale took 9 years to complete. For reasons unknown and under conditions of total secrecy, Voynich managed to procure some of the books before they entered the Vatican library. One of them was the Voynich Manuscript. Voynich believed that this impenetrable book contained authentic wisdom, or at least he said so during publicity kicks in the States, trying to make his treasured book famous. Quote, "When the time comes," he told The Times, "I will prove to the world that the black magic of the Middle Ages consisted in discoveries far in advance of 20th century science."
Whoa.
Voynich never cracked the code, if one indeed exists. In Cryptographic Attempts, another essay that accompanies the Yale facsimile, William Sherman notes that some of the greatest code breakers in history attempted to unlock the manuscript's mysteries. The impenetrability of the Voynichese became a professional problem for those in the code game. William Romaine Newbold, a professor of intellectual and moral philosophy at the University of Pennsylvania in the early part of the 20th century, persuaded himself that the writing used both a cipher common from Bacon's alchemical manuscripts along with the separate and far more complicated system best described as an anagrammed micrographic shorthand, which basically means they were anagrams, right? You could say the letters are all switched around, which basically means that you can just do whatever you want. Like if you say that it's anagrammed cryptographic, that you can just swap the letters around until you get something you want. It's practically pointless to decrypt anything like that. This system of cipher requires transposition, changing the order of the letters, abbreviation using a system taken from ancient Greek, and microscopic notation whereby individual pen strokes with a single character, when magnified, serve. Let's see, I just lost my place. Whatever. Anyway, it's weird. Let's see. Yeah, I did lose my place.
You totally dropped the phone.
I dropped it, yeah. Try to take a pull for my smoke. Okay, here it is. Whereby individual pen strokes within a single character, when magnified, serve as shorthand symbols for other letters. This theory was initially endorsed by the eminent medievalist John Matthews Manley, who had worked as one of the U.S. Army's chief cryptographists during the First World War. But it did not hold up to closer scrutiny, and Manley eventually concluded that Newbold's decipherments were not discoveries of secrets hidden by Roger Bacon, but the products of his own intense enthusiasm and his learned and ingenious subconscious. In other words, he was making it up because you can when you're doing it that way. When you can transpose all the letters and you can add vowels and, So the next great mind to apply itself to the manuscript's code belonged to William F. Friedman, another Army cryptographer, who was among the first people to use computers for textual analysis. In 1925, Manley connected Friedman and his wife Elizabeth, also a cryptographer, with the manuscript, sending them photographs. They worked on the project for 40 years. Friedman and his colleagues broke Japan's Code Purple during the Second World War. And Friedman became the chief crypt analyst for the War Department and head of the Signals Intelligence Service in the 40s and 50s. The historian David Kahn called him the world's greatest cryptologist. By 1944, Friedman had formed the Voynich Manuscript Study Group with some colleagues, and they never cracked the code. The Friedmans did, however, provide an enigmatic message about the manuscript in an article in Philological, let's see, is that right? Yeah, Philological Quarterly, Acrostics, Anagrams, and Chaucer, published in 1959. The article included a long excursus on the pointlessness of looking for anagrammatic ciphers. A note revealed that the statement itself was an anagram. The authors had left the solution in the anagram in a sealed envelope with the PQ editor. After William died in 1970, the editor revealed the message along with a reprint of the piece. The Voynich MS was an early attempt to construct an artificial or universal language of the a priori type. Friedman. That was what he was saying in his anagram that he wrote.
What does that mean?
That somebody was trying to artificially create a language. It was one of the first attempts to do that, or the first known attempts.
What is the language spoken in South America that?
Yeah, Aymara.
Aymara, yeah.
It appears to be created, but it's like many thousands of years old. Yeah, that's why I was saying the first known attempt.
Yeah.
Except this is not a known. Friedman is claiming this. He doesn't have any proof for it.
He was just mad because he couldn't figure it out.
Right. According to Sherman, the majority of those who have tried their hand at the manuscript's code have been amateurs, and many have more interest in conspiracy theories than cryptographic systems. Nowadays, you can find people trying to crack the code on Reddit. There are many competing theories. Some suggest that the manuscript might be part of a con world or a constructed fantasy. But then one poster responds, this is probably me, I don't see why someone would create such an expensive manuscript if this were the case. Because it's really expensive and difficult to do this, and it must have taken somebody a long time. Another Redditor asks, anyone else wondering if this is the material, if this is material from a lost Mayan codex? Anyway, I'm not going to read the rest of the article because it goes into some crap. But that's a pretty good rundown of the history of it and the basic idea. Now let me put some pictures up for you guys real quick here so you guys can look at these.
So what was the original date that it was found, or what is it? Is it actually dated to a period, or was it just found at some period? Or
well, Voynich purchased it in the late 1800s or something like that. But the point is that they've carbon dated the pages, which gave them the 15th century. But that doesn't tell us anything either. It seems to have been a copy. So there's a bunch of stuff that I know that's not in any of these articles that I found. For one thing, the script is perfect. There are no errors anywhere in all 240 pages, which is, first of all, incredibly difficult to understand because that's almost impossible. You see if you can sit down, even if you're copying directly from a book, and write 240 pages of script and never make a single error.
Yeah. And
you're doing it in calligraphy, with a paintbrush.
Yeah.
Right?
It's crazy.
The script is perfect and it's just gorgeous. It looks like an art form. Let me post these pictures. Unfortunately, I had somebody take 1 million photographs with my phone right before I got to this part. They were going to be the first pictures on here, but they're not now.
And it's in full color and
yes, so which means that they had to go make the ink, which is very, very difficult. You couldn't just go out and buy a box of Sharpies back then. So he's got greens and reds and browns and blues and and then there's the pages, this vellum, right? And they're large, enormous pages that are folded up to make the book. So the paper is difficult to procure and very, very, very expensive. And then you have to have all the tools and the materials, and then you have to be able to sit there and do it and be fed and watered while you're doing it. So somebody has to, you know what I'm saying? It's just not a cheap thing to undertake in these time periods. and not an easy thing to do. It's very, very difficult. And 240 pages is like enormous for a book of this period too. And it's a single person. All the artwork and the penmanship have been studied minutely, and it's the work of a single person. And they made no mistakes in any of the art or any of the writing. Like, there's no places where they
ink blots or whatever.
There's no
droplets
mistakes.
and-
It's perfect. I mean, the art is like kind of.
I need another feather. Get me a feather. It's like you just imagine like how many things could possibly go wrong.
I know.
Right?
I know. His feather breaks. Go!
But obviously, it never broke.
Right.
You know,
Whoever
on the
did it
page.
made zero mistakes and had zero problems. Or if they made a mistake, they threw that entire page away and redid the
Right.
entire page until they made zero mistakes. And that's just.
But if it's folded up pages and cut, they probably, could they tell if it's from the same?
I don't know if they're cut. They're all kind of put together and folded in such a way where they're not cut. I'm not sure how it's done. I can't find these pictures that I've kind of. Oh, here they are. Here we go.
Yeah, I was trying to ask you questions while you're doing stuff, and then every time I do, you stop doing the
I
stuff
know.
you're trying to do.
I can't look for pictures and also answer your questions at the same time.
Yeah, Brett's saying it sounds almost like an ancient printing press of some type is the only feasible way. That's what I was thinking too. It's like what was guiding the tool?
Yeah.
Unexpected Christopher Dunn.
Yeah. Here they are.
So that's cool.
Look at so you can zoom in and look at the script. Now that's one of the pages where, yeah. Like, look how difficult that script would be to.
Badass.
Yeah.
And so, man, but it looks. What do you call that? It kind of looks like our alphabet.
Right. It has between 25 and 30 characters, depending on who you talk to. So this is the other interesting thing. Now you can go if you go online, you can find a bunch of articles saying that AI has cracked the code. Yeah, see, these are some of the magical circles.
Wow. That's awesome.
These are high definition images too. So if you click on them, they're really high def. And we'll put these in the show notes, folks. Yeah, there are some of the weird naked ladies sliding through tubes with text all around them. It's very strange. Those are some of the astronomical ones.
Okay, this is how the pages are folded up. Like,
Yeah.
so each time you flip a page, you can actually unfold it.
Some of the pages, as far as I understand, unfold inside of it like a centerfold.
Yeah.
Right? Some of them do that, not all of them.
all
But
of
some
them.
pages, when you get to them, it'll unfold several times into this long, narrow thing that's like a centerfold or whatever.
Yeah, so he didn't make a mistake on any one of those.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. The script reminds me somewhat, if you look at Da Vinci's journals, where he was doing that reverse mirror writing or whatever, like where he had this script where he was doing it with his left hand, and he was doing it where you had to look in a mirror to see it turned around. It kind of looks like that. That it's a very similar profile. What's also very strange is like there are words that are repeated over and over. Like, I'm going to get away from the microphone and show. Like,
Yeah, gallo.
Yeah.
I saw that.
like their spells or chants or
It
incantations.
really looks like it's saying gallo. I'm just going to read a little bit from this. Dag, gallo, etilerlagen, gallo, creedy, creed, serendigi, creedling, effetilike, spot, opago, gallo, hi, esrdi, srale. That's kind of pretty much what it says, guys. And let's pick another part down here. Arga serg gallo. Grievous os og. Gor og ziegen. Lo gallo. Ro sergally. Sog off. Gallo. Greedy perf. Decary.
Sog off. Gallo.
Gallo. That's crazy.
So the second article I have on this is about the AI parsing of the Voynich Manuscript, which is more recent.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Okay, so this one is called AI Did Not Decode the Cryptic Voynich Manuscript. It just added to the mystery. Claims about AI cracking the 600-year-old code were just wishful thinking. If you were compiling a list of the world's 100 oddest objects, just the weirdest stuff that human civilization has excreted over the millennia, then you'd have to leave room somewhere for the Voynich Manuscript. It's 600 years old, written in a language no one can read, and full of diagrams no one understands. It's a genuine, bona fide, world-class mystery.
It's a bona fide snake mystery.
That's right.
Made for Snake Bros. The guy was like, I'm going to make something for Snake Bros.
This is presumably why when newsrooms around the world had a chance this week to publish stories claiming it had been decoded by artificial intelligence, they leapt at the opportunity. Except, of course, that it hasn't. Not at all. According to experts, the Voynich manuscript remains as inscrutable as ever, but understanding why this new research fails to decode the text and why exactly it does add to the annals of Voynichology has its own value. It also emphasizes, if further emphasis were needed, that this manuscript is one extremely odd cookie. The research that sparked the coverage is a paper named Decoding Anagrammed Text Written in an Unknown Language and Script. It was published in 2016, but it was presented at a conference last year and picked up by journalists earlier this month. In it, computer science professor Greg Kondrak and graduate student Bradley Howard describe a method for finding the source language of ciphered texts. Okay, so that, in other words, you're looking for what language the cipher is in, right? 'Cause that's what, like, we don't know what, like, if you could decipher this, what language would it be in?
Right.
So they're trying to figure out, is there some AI or some not AI, because AI is not what they used, some computer way where it can look at things,
all and compare
do
it to
a
all the
statistical
languages.
analysis and figure out what language it might be written in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's written in Zorg. Gallo. An unknown language.
Zog. Gallo. Okay. So, computer science professor Greg Kondrak and graduate student Bradley Howard describe a method for finding the source language of ciphered text before turning that method on their manuscript itself and deciding that it was originally written in Hebrew before being encoded in its current form. It's a claim that, if true, would be a glacier-sized break in an ice-cold case. The 240-page Voynich manuscript is written in an unknown alphabet that's never been seen before or since. The script is comprised of roughly 25 to 30 individual characters, interpretations vary, written from left to right in a single elegant hand. Scattered throughout are illustrations of unidentifiable plants, astrological diagrams, doodles of castles and dragons, and a particularly odd section that shows naked women bathing in pools connected by flowing tubes. It looks like the map of an ancient water park, but scholars suggest it might be medical or alchemical intent.
Yeah, it kind of looked like, honestly, that picture, really, what they're bathing in, looks sort of like the large intestine.
Yeah, I thought that too. It's strangely medical.
Yeah.
The women are the bacterial. He's illustrating how bacteria mess you up by using naked ladies. I don't know. Most assume that the manuscript is written in what's called a substitution cipher. This is one of the simplest and most ancient types of codes in which letters of an established alphabet are swapped for invented ones. The problem is that hundreds of years of study have been unable to work out which language the Voynich manuscript was originally written in. No one has ever made a convincing case for any particular language. Lisa Fagan Davis, the executive director of the Medieval Academy of America and keen Voynich scholar, tells The Verge. I've seen suggestions that it's encoded in Arabic, Aztec, Roma, Latin, and Italian. Davis says people tend to study the paleographic, forensic, and artistic evidence to find a country of origin, and with that, a source language, but she adds that computational analysis is also used. In other words, they look at the illustrations and try to figure out where this comes from. Yeah. I mean, people are claiming it's Aztec and Mayan, and it's very strange.
Whoa.
Like, there's, as far as I know, there's no evidence for any of that, but like the whole idea that it's some like lost Mayan codex that,
Well, weren't there a whole bunch of books that they burned?
Yes, and that's why they're saying, because like the people who had this before Voynich got it, it was the
Spanish?
No, it was the Catholic order.
Oh, the Jesuits.
The Jesuits. They were transferring a shitload of books to the Vatican Library, and Voynich somehow got his hands on a few, and this is one of them. So the Jesuits had it for some reason.
Yeah.
And no one knows really. There's the claim that it was sold to one of the popes or something like that.
The Jesuits are a very cunning bunch of mathematical thinkers.
That's right.
And care about no one.
What are you trying to say? All right. That's why they wear those hats. Okay. So they trained a number of algorithms to pick out these metrics using the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as their sample text, because it's written in a whopping 380 different languages, right? So they had the computer algorithm they designed to go through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and like have it go through all of those as the test for it to see if it would work. Okay. And it worked, not too badly anyway. According to Professor Shlomo Argamon, a computational linguist at Illinois Institute of Technology, the preliminary tests or results are perhaps slightly questionable, but not more so than many other results often published in the scientific literature. And so with their algorithmic pattern matcher trained and tested, Kondrak and Hauer turned to the Voynich Manuscript. Here, say experts, is where things really started going downhill. The problem is not any single mistake, but a series of assumptions. See? Stacks of assumptions, the downfall of modern science. A series of assumptions and omissions that give Kondrak and Hauer more leeway in interpreting their results than is scientifically rigorous. The first is quite straightforward. Their algorithm was trained on modern-day languages, but the manuscript is carbon dated to 15th century. So if it was originally written in Hebrew, it would be written in 15th century Hebrew. The grammar, spelling, and vocabulary would have been quite different, especially for a manuscript like the Voynich that is scientific as opposed to biblical or liturgical in nature, says Davis. The second is that although Kondrak and Hauer's algorithm can produce suggestions for source languages of ciphered texts, it doesn't evaluate the likelihood of these matches. So when the pair say that Hebrew was the highest scoring match for the manuscript without rating the likelihood, that is a bit of a meaningless boast. Someone has to have the highest score. They mentioned some of the other top matches, as I recall. One was Malay, which is a language very, 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 very different from Hebrew. The third assumption is perhaps the biggest. Kondrak and Hauer claim that as well as being a substitution cipher, the Voynich manuscript was also written in anagrams. So the letters in each individual words are scrambled. And once again, so first of all, Hebrew has no vowels. So you get to add the vowels you want. And then if you also claim it's an anagram, which means you can unscramble the letters however you want and then add any vowels you want, you can come up with any translation you freaking want. Yeah. Anyway, that's as far as I'm going to go in that article. That's the basic gist of it. So don't believe the articles you'll see online when it says AI has decoded it, because number one, it wasn't AI, and number two, no, it didn't decode it.
Yeah.
But here's
why wouldn't they have tried to use the languages of the day in their algorithms? Like,
I don't know.
Do you think that was just an oversight?
Well, I think that
maybe they built the thing for another reason, and they were like, let's plug this in.
Yeah, that's what I think what it was. I think what they did initially was they ran it through that Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was written in 380 modern languages, to see if their algorithm worked, to see if their theory, which was a computer science theory, it's an algorithmic theory. Right. They're not really interested in decoding anything, right? They're just testing algorithms and basically what's called statistical learning in computational theory, right? That's what they're interested in. That's what these guys are writing a paper on. Okay. Then they were like, "Oh, we could get some publicity by plugging." I should
mail them my Rubik's Cube and see if they can solve it.
I just think that they decided they could get some publicity by plugging the Voynich manuscript text into their algorithm, and they did.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is that this is not the same study that this article was talking about, but other people have done statistical analyses on the text because people have claimed that it's just nonsense. Like, look at it. It says Gallo like 800 times on the same page. It's not real. It's not real, like, language, right? Yeah. Well, people have run statistical analysis on all of the text all together, using computational analysis, and I don't understand this totally, so I'm just going to parrot what I've read. But in other words, like, gibberish looks very differently statistically from an actual language. They have appearances statistically, and the Voynich manuscript text has the appearance of a actual language as opposed to any kind of gibberish or made up stuff. Yeah. So it's unlikely that a 15th century or whenever it was written person could like fool a computer writing gibberish. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you would have to really know what you're doing to fool a computer and also actually be writing gibberish as opposed to anything meaningful. So no one has been able to solve it, but all computational and statistical testing does say that it actually says something, that it's actually saying something. It is not nothing. It's not like a, what do they call it? Like a fantasy, or a con world.
Yeah.
A lot of people for a long time, basically the scriptards were saying that it was just all made up, and it was made up by somebody and sold to a king for an exorbitant amount of money just so they can make money. The guy basically tricked the king into thinking that this was some magical alchemical text. So sure, he spent like 40 years making this badass text so that he could get 600 ducats. Right? I don't think so. Give me them ducats.
Give me them ducats.
Yeah, anybody who's played GTA San Andreas will recognize that. Give me them ducats.
Man, that's really cool.
I actually think that
I should get it and convert it to a PDF format and have my phone read it to me.
yeah, you can go get the new version that they've reprinted or whatever. Just go get the PDF of it and they can read it to you. Gallo, guys, tribulage, guys, gallo, gallo, gallo.
It's really cool. Like the way the symbols are, the circles or whatever, the magic
Yeah, it's
spells,
beautiful, right?
all the language written in circle. I mean, it's like he used a compass,
Yeah.
to get that. How do you write in a circle like that?
What I want is for someone to, I'm waiting for someone to x-ray the pages. I don't know if that'll ever happen. I bet you
Invisible texts?
Yes, that somebody has used invisible ink on a lot of it, and we're probably missing a lot of the text because of that, or maybe many of the symbols. And you could be right that when I look at it, I've done a lot of this drawing and writing thing to comics, right? You have to draw the stuff first and then write around it to make it look like that.
Yeah.
So the pictures were drawn first, and then they wrote the text around the pictures. You can see how the words go in and out of the little
Yeah.
yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
How perfectly straight the lines are and everything. I mean, it's just
Right.
And these circles, like they had to use a compass
Yeah.
to get those circles.
And what is that? Like, you got the moon in the middle there of that giant snake
Yeah.
skin thing. I mean, is he talking about the world serpent? That's what that looks like to me, is the world serpent, like, for some reason. But it also looks like it's full of eyes. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And the plants don't exist. Right? They're not real, but they have. In other words, they're made by somebody who knew real plants, because they all have real aspects, but they're not any known varieties of actual plants, right? And then things like that, where the letters connect across two words, is seen throughout the text, but it's unknown why that's happening.
So a friend of ours, a fellow Snake Bro listener, came up with his own like coded language, written language.
Oh yeah.
And I have to ask him about it again. I can't remember. I remember him trying to teach me how it worked. But there were all these symbols that he created that when that symbol appeared, it would do something weird to where you had to reverse these letters or add this other thing or something like that. It was like extra symbols that caused actions.
Yeah.
That you had to do to unscramble something on the page.
So it's not a simple substitution cipher. It was something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a machine cipher. Yeah.
Yeah. So this, like the way there's all these double L's, like in the middle of the word gallo, they all have it's really looks like two L's, but they're connected.
It's actually a single symbol. Yeah.
Yeah. They're connected at the top by a little loop.
Yeah.
And
then it goes across that entire thing. That's what that is.
Yeah, that one goes all the way across to another word.
Yeah.
So it's like, I wonder if that is giving you some action that you have to divide.
Yeah.
This
and
word
some of them
or
don't
switch
loop
it.
on one side or the other. It actually just has a loop on only one side or the other. You notice that? Some of the double L's have two loops.
Yeah.
And some of them only have a loop on one side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they could be directing you to how, what you have to do or which direction you have to go.
Right.
It's like that was one of the things I think that like if their symbols showed up, then you had to go read this next part backwards or something.
And then look at the top of this.
Yeah.
Looks like the top of one of those double L's, but it's not.
Yep. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Some friggin' nerd needs to figure this out.
Right. So this is the other question. So it's so difficult to make a book in the time period when this was supposedly made. Why make a book that no one can read?
Yeah, I don't know. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But so one thing that occurred to me is that like maybe this was like, you know, some language or secret thing that, you know, the order of the people who say built the cathedrals and stuff,
Yeah.
you know, like protecting their secret art,
Yeah.
but still recording it.
Yeah, but what are they protecting? I mean, like, it's very difficult to understand because nothing in it seems to be real. This is why people thought it was all gibberish, because the plants aren't real. And yet this
Yeah.
person obviously spent all this time doing intricate diagrams of the plants.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't show you any of the botanical stuff. There's only one picture with the plant on it, but there's ones where it shows entire plants. It shows all the systems and everything. Like the person had actually gotten the plants and spread them out on something and like did, you know, like actual study of them. Maybe not with a microscope, but that they were actually drawing diagrams of. It looks like they were drawing diagrams of plants they were looking at. You know, not making it up, but you know, people are creative. But I don't know. I don't know what to think about any of it because it's. I don't know. The star diagrams in it don't match anything either. This has led people to think it's like Portal, you know, it's like guy went to a different world and like mapped out all the plants and like, I don't know. It's very strange stuff. So we'll keep thinking about that. We're going to take a quick break, come back for the second half of the show and talk about something.
Snakes, maybe?
Possibly. I didn't see it. I don't know if he drew any snakes in that Voynich Manuscript.
Well, there's definitely a snake skin full of eyes.
That's right. With half our dolmens tied behind our backs because we don't know what they are for. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, second hour, first segment. And we just spent the last segment talking about the mysterious and strange Voynich Manuscript, which I believe is actually probably a copy of a very much more ancient text.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you holding back snake facts?
No, I have zero way of corroborating anything about it. But I have spent a lot of time in, like, you know, they mentioned in one of those articles at the very end about Reddit people trying to talk about this, and I've spent some time in there and with what people call the Voynich crazies. And there's a lot of very interesting stuff, and we're basically waiting for somebody to X-ray the pages. So I don't know if that'll ever happen because X-ray is damaging, you know. But anyway.
Maybe they could use that really slow thing that they put inside the pyramid, right? just set up a couple of machines nearby the book.
Oh yeah,
and just wait for
Muons.
3 days.
Yeah, a muon detector. Yeah. Well, if somebody used vanishing ink on it, the only way to see it now would be with X-ray or something similar. And I do think some of the pages have been X-rayed because they're like during the period where they were trying to establish the dating, the age of it, right? Like doing the carbon dating and stuff.
Yeah.
But the whole document needs to be X-rayed. So, and there are also like 6.
Yeah, because they could have written, say,
Excuse me,
bunch
I was
of
talking.
Oh, okay.
This part I was going to say is important. There are also like 6 or something missing pages
that
have
6 pages
torn out or something like that. I don't know exactly the number. It may be 4, but there are pages that are missing from the document. So somebody did eat all the best naked ladies, probably. Someone was like, don't keep in that one.
I was thinking that the parts of the book that have the paintings on them could actually have been first written in invisible ink.
Oh, yeah.
A full page, like decipher page or whatever,
Oh,
cipher
yeah.
page. And then the painting painted over it.
Painted over it. Interesting. Yeah. No one really knows.
Distract them with plants.
And naked ladies. It always works. All right, so this is something I've been thinking about doing on the show since we do talk about mysteries of missing people, and there are not very many. There are not many incidents of vast numbers of people going missing at the same time. We've talked about Roanoke, right?
Yeah. And Malaysian Airlines flight something
370.
Yeah.
Yeah, Flight 370. You're right. I hadn't thought of that one. That is a mass missing mystery. But this one is called Village of the Dead, the Anjikuni mystery. Okay, this is written by Rob Morphy. Legends of mysterious mass disappearances have cropped up all across the globe. Without a doubt, the most famous incident in North American history is the unknown fate of the citizens of Roanoke Colony, who were last seen alive in 1587, but an even more inexplicable case concerns the whereabouts of the over 30 men, women, and children who allegedly vanished without a trace from an Inuit fishing village in the first half of the 20th century. The trout and pike-filled estuary known as Anjikuni Lake, also spelled Angikuni, is located along the Kazan River in the remote Kivalik region of Nunavut, Canada. The out-of-the-way area is rich with legends of malicious wood spirits and beasts like the Wendigo. Or Wendigo, I'm not sure how to say that. I've heard a lot of people say Wendigo. But as fascinating as these oft-told tales are, there are none more intriguing than the terrifying and controversial mysteries surrounding the collective vanishing of the villagers who once lived on the stony coast of Anjikuni's frigid waters. Our tale begins on an Arctic evening back in November of 1930. A Canadian fur trapper by the name of Joe LaBelle was seeking respite from the bitter cold and a warm place to bunk down for the night when he tromped into an Inuit village that was nestled on the rocky shores of Canada's Lake Anjikuni. And I could be saying that wrong, too. I probably am. LaBelle had visited the area before and knew it to be a bustling fishing village full of tents, rough-hewn huts, and friendly locals. But when he shouted a greeting, the only sound that returned to him was that of his own echo and the snowshoes crunching through the icy frost. He could see that the ramshackle structures that were silhouetted underneath the full moon, but he saw no bustling people, nor barking sled dogs, nor any other signs of life. Even within the huts, the expected sounds of laughter and conversation were replaced with deathly silence. LaBelle also noted with a chill that not a single chimney had smoke coming out of it, and that was when he spied a fire crackling in the distance. LaBelle, trying his best to remain calm, picked up his pace and headed towards the glowing embers of the dying fire in the distance, eager to find some trace of humanity. When the trapper arrived at the flames, he was greeted not by a friendly face, but by a charred stew that had bafflingly been left to blacken above the embers. Now, this is classic Mary Celeste type shit, where they were in the middle of cooking dinner and they just disappear, right? The veteran tracker, having spent so much of his life skulking around shadowy and inaccessible forests, was likely not easily spooked, but it's difficult to imagine that he was not bathed in a cold sweat as he passed the derelict, wave-battered kayaks into the heart of the ghost village, wondering what had happened to his inhabitants. LaBelle methodically pulled back the caribou skin flaps and checked all the shacks, hoping to find telltale signs of a mass exodus, but much to his chagrin, he discovered that all of the huts were stocked with the kinds of foodstuff and weapons that would never have been abandoned by their owners. In one shelter, he found a pot of stewed caribou that had grown moldy and a child's half-mended sealskin coat that lay discarded on a bunk with a bone needle still embedded in it as if someone had deserted their effort in mid-stitch. He even inspected the fish storehouse and noticed that its supplies had not been depleted. Nowhere were there any signs of a struggle or pandemonium, and LaBelle knew all too well that deserting a perfectly habitable community without rifles, food, or parkas would be utterly unthinkable, no matter what the circumstances might have been to force the tribe to spontaneously migrate. He then scanned the borders of the village in hopes of ascertaining what direction the Inuits traveled in. Even though the villagers' exit seemed to have been relatively recent and hasty enough to leave food on the flames, he could find no trace of their flight no matter how hard he searched. Cold and fatigued as he was, LaBelle was simply too terrified to linger in this enigmatically vacant village. Although it meant he had to forego the comforts of food, warmth, and shelter, the trapper considered the risks of remaining to be too great and decided to make haste through the sub-zero temperatures to a telegraph office located many miles away, lest the same nefarious and, in LaBelle's estimation, unmistakably supernatural force that he claimed the villagers would descend upon him. The exhausted and frostbitten LaBelle finally staggered into the telegraph office, and within minutes an emergency message was fired off to the closest Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or RCMP, barracks. By the time the Mounties arrived, several hours later, LaBelle had calmed himself enough to relate his disturbing tale. According to 1984's The World's Greatest UFO Mysteries by Roger Bohr and Nigel Blundell, on their way to Anjikuni Lake, the Mounties stopped for a bit to rest at a shanty that was shared by trapper Armand Lamont and his two sons. Armand Laurent and his two sons. The officers explained to their host that they were headed to Anjikuni to deal with a kind of problem. There's a kind of a problem. The Mounties inquired as to whether or not the Laurents had seen anything unusual during the past few days, and the trapper was forced to concede that he and his son had spied a bizarre gleaming object soaring across the sky just a few days before. So remember that this is in a UFO book. Laurent claimed that the enormous illuminated flying thing seemed to change shape before their very eyes, transforming from a cylinder into a bullet-like object. He further divulged that this unusual object was flying in the direction of the village at Anjikuni. The Mounties left the Laurent home soon after, and they continued on their treacherous journey, probably thinking the guy was full of crap. Once they arrived at the scene, the Mounties were not only able to confirm LaBelle's testimony regarding the state of the now desolate village, but according to some sources, they made an additional, even more arcane discovery on the outskirts. Various accounts verify that the officers conducting the search were alarmed when they stumbled across a plethora of open graves in the village burial ground. In other words, not only the people left, but they took all their dead with them.
Whoa.
There are also less dramatic, though no less baffling, reports that state that it was just a single tomb that was violated. Either way, it is a severe taboo for an Inuit grave to be desecrated, so why were these bodies, or body, moved? To add an extra pinch of weird to the proceedings, the witnesses claimed that the earth around the grave was frozen as hard as a rock. These reports also suggested that the marker stones had been stacked in two neat piles on either side of the graves, confirming this was not the work of animals. Needless to say, the Mounties at the scene were perturbed by these discoveries, and a substantial search party was organized post-haste. During the search, no additional clues as to the villagers' whereabouts turned up, but another grisly discovery was purportedly made. According to reports, no less than 7, though some say only 2 or 3, sled dog carcasses were discovered about 300 feet away from the edge of the village. According to Canadian pathologists, these unfortunate canines all apparently died of starvation, whereupon they were covered by snowdrifts, which buried them up to nearly 12 feet deep. How these animals managed to starve when they were surrounded by huts full of food is yet another unexplained piece of this enigmatic puzzle. There is a single account which claims that the ill-fated animals were tied to scrubby trees, which would explain their inability to scavenge for food, but this does not resolve the issue of why they succumbed so quickly. Logic seems to dictate that they certainly would not have had time to starve to death between the moment of this collective vanishing and the arrival of LaBelle, who reportedly found food still burning over dying embers. This begs the question, did the villagers allow their own dogs to go hungry intentionally before they slipped into the ether? These invaluable dogs, whose very existence was essential to the village's own survival. If so, why? And if not, then what happened?
Wait a minute. Did it say the dogs were buried in a snowdrift?
Yeah, 12 feet deep.
So how did they find them?
They were like on the outskirts of the village in the area where the dog kennel was, as far as I know.
Okay. If they were buried in 12 feet of snow, I'm just not sure I understand what, like, they're going along, and how do they find dogs if they're buried in 12 feet of snow, I guess.
I don't know.
Question.
I'm sure that they didn't find them immediately.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. That's what I needed.
As if this tale weren't strange enough, the officers at the scene supposedly reported odd bluish lights pulsating on the horizon above the village. The men watched until the illumination disappeared, all of them concurring that this unusual sight or light show did not resemble the aurora borealis. After 2 weeks of investigation, the Mounties, based on some berries they found in one of the cooking pots, came to the somewhat dubious conclusion that the villagers had been gone for at least 2 months. Based on berries. Look at these berries. They've obviously been gone for 2 months. This presents yet another question. If the Inuits had really abandoned their homes 8 weeks before, then who was responsible for making the fire that LaBelle saw when he first arrived in the village? Fact and folklore have a notorious habit of interbreeding when bizarre events such as the one that had transpired at Lake Enchikuni occur. Nevertheless, the first official account of the missing village is alleged to have been printed on November 28th, 1930, when special correspondent Emmett E. Keller published a report of the events in the Canadian newspaper Le Pas, Manitoba. Anyway, that's basically the story.
And that's
After
crazy.
that, they go into like the whole reporting.
I was like imagining being that guy. Like it's dark outside. You got moonlight, and you're hiking up to the village. You're like, hey,
Yeah, and you've been there before, and you
Yeah.
know that it's full of people, and yeah,
and like there's no smoke in any of the chimneys or whatever.
yeah,
And then you see that fire in the distance, and like go up there, and it's like that would
burnt.
just, yeah.
Yeah. That would be weird. And then he starts opening all the doors and going
Yeah.
in, and he sees like stuff laying around, guns leaned up against the walls,
Yeah.
coats hanging from the.
And no footprints or whatever.
Yeah, you
like,
couldn't find where they had
like
left.
mass footprints leading
Yeah.
the area, and the fact that it's like, okay, now I've got to travel miles away in the dark,
Yeah.
to this place that I know of that's nearby. Like,
Yeah.
like I remember when I was a kid, our best friend lived through the woods. Like we had to go down into the woods, and there was this big bamboo forest.
Yeah.
And go across a creek. It was real dark down in there because the trees are all 100 feet tall, big canopies, and we'd go over there and hang out, and then we'd have to come home at night.
Yeah.
And like you just walking through the creek, you go across a little bridge, get halfway into the bamboo forest, and then like the littlest thing
Yeah.
happens, and you're like, just tear off in this.
No light. You're not walking with a light because you don't bring a flashlight because you're dumb. Like,
Yeah.
I would always forget to bring a flashlight. I'd go over there in the middle of the day and be like, I'll be fine. And then it's pitch black. And I'm like, shit. And walking through the woods in the dark.
I can just imagine this dude. He's like all tired, and he has to hike like 4 more miles or whatever it was to
Yeah.
get to the. And it's like you hear a twig break, and he's just like just takes off, dude, in the snow. It's like as fast as you can.
Yeah. And you can imagine that you wouldn't want to, like, kind of like if you, like, just imagine going over to your friend's house, and there's no one there.
All the cars are there.
All the cars are there, all their stuff's there, the lights are on or whatever. Are you going to go in there and like eat
Car
food?
doors is open.
Yeah, you gonna go in
and
there
The
and,
battery's like almost dead.
Yeah. Are you going to go in there and eat food and then sleep in one of their beds? Like,
No.
You're not. So yeah, that's a very strange story, and it's never been solved.
Man, that's
Just like
really
Roanoke.
weird.
Yeah. And the thing about the sled dogs is strange too, because again, and this is difficult for us to understand, but the sled dogs are their livelihood up there. Like,
Yeah.
they have to have them. They hunt with them, Like, you can't go out and kill a caribou and then drag it back through the snow on foot. You have to put it on a sled. And the
Yeah.
dogs are the dogs are like essential. And for them to have vanished without their dogs, and the dogs are like starved to death, but the timelines don't match up, and I don't know, it's very strange. And then the bodies being gone from the graves is very
Yeah.
weird.
That's really crazy.
Yeah, so it got put into UFO stories because supposedly the Mounties encountered these people on the way who claimed that they saw something in the sky. So it got put in UFO books because they're trying to push the idea that they all got abducted, and the aliens took all their dead as well, is the idea. I'm not sure if that's. I don't know. I'm just like, okay, that's the nuts and bolts people. Like, they want the aliens to have abducted everybody, including the dead people, but left the dogs for whatever reason, And for some reason they stacked up I don't know. It's just a strange.
Stacked up the rocks on either side of the grave.
The headstones. They stacked them up. Like, the aliens beamed everybody up, but then stacked up the headstones. Like, I don't know. I don't know what that means. It's a very strange story. It is a lot like Roanoke. They're just gone,
Yeah.
Except that Roanoke was not obviously recently inhabited when the people came back to it. They had been gone for a while.
Yeah.
Like, the place was all overgrown and everything. So that was
Still, a bunch of their stuff was there.
yeah, their stuff was all still there. Yeah. Strange things are in these woods.
Yeah.
North America.
Strange things are afoot in the woods. Yeah. I don't know what to do with that.
It's just one of those mysteries where you're just like, I don't even know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every mystery I brought up today is like one where you're like, okay, that's a book full of stuff that nobody can read with plants that don't exist. Okay, so if a whole village of people disappeared, I don't know what to do with that. Maybe that's what that book is about.
Yeah.
So, what's it, you were saying you had like a bunch of little things that aren't full segments or whatever,
Yeah.
or physics things you've been listening to?
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out quantum mechanics. No, I've been listening to Sean Carroll's podcast again, and like the way that guy describes quantum physics or quantum mechanics is like, I don't know. There's something about it, like it resonates, no pun intended, with with like the way I have, like, since we started working on the elastic universe hypothesis.
Yeah.
And thinking about everything being, waves is a simple way to say it.
Yeah.
So basically, this guy he's at the forefront of quantum mechanics and quantum theory. And he claims that the best model of physics that we have now is called quantum field theory.
Yeah, quantum field theory.
And quantum field theory basically says that they are not really particles or waves, but that there are these fields, these overlapping fields, and what we would call the ether or whatever, right? But there's multiple different ones, and what we see as a particle
Like
is
overlapping time caves, the overlapping fields.
Yeah. What we see as a particle is actually a disturbance in one of those fields, right? So a quantum particle, for example, would be, like the Higgs boson. Or most people that are interested in this kind of stuff are familiar with that they found with the Hadron Collider. Is actually in a field called the Higgs field. And the boson is a particle, which is not really a particle, but the way you can imagine it is there's a disturbance in that field, like a resonance in the field. So it's vibrating, basically. And that creates a blip on a detector, right?
Yeah. Once it decays.
Well, yeah, we can't actually detect
the boson
itself, but it decays into other things, and the detectors pick that up, and then they can extrapolate and say there was a disturbance. Yeah. And it was predicted, so everything matched the predictions, right? Yeah. But the idea is that all these different quantum particles are actually little pockets of resonance or vibration in a medium that is, you could imagine it being made up of those particles. It's not really made up of them, but the field resonates at a very, very distinct and specific frequency. Yeah. And it requires certain amplitude and all that, certain energy level of vibration. So an atom having all the different parts, that we know and love of the atom. That's what he always says. Those different pieces of the atom are all actual like resonances in different fields. Yeah. That are entangled together, sort of. They're like the resonance of one field can disturb another field and cause a resonance in that one, and so on and so forth. And so that they all sort of work together, and they have sustain, so they stick around for a while, but they will decay. They and so in audio engineering or whatever, we talk about things in the same way. Like you have the attack, which is how what is the word for it? How loud the vibration starts. Like what starts it? Like if you hit something with a hammer, it has a high attack. Yeah. If you're scraping a bow across a violin string, it has a very low attack. It slowly comes in, and then it has sustain, then decay, and then release. Yeah. So they kind of talk about it in the same way. So these particles are really just resonances in the disturbances in these fields. So the
Disturbances in the force.
the Large Hadron Collider is not actually breaking apart subatomic particles into smaller particles that are the building blocks of those particles. That's not what's really happening.
Yeah.
And what's cool is that the deeper we got into the elastic universe hypothesis, trying to figure out, like, just work out, like, these models, you know, of like, well, how would this work if everything is resonating and all that kind of stuff. Like, the deeper I thought about it and the more I learned about quantum physics, like, I kind of, like, had this same idea that, and I remember coming to you and telling you, like, okay, the Planck and these quarks or whatever that they're finding when they smash these particles together are not actually
dots of material.
The pieces of material that were made that this larger one is made of. They're actually bringing the slamming of these things together is like ringing a bell, and these other things that we notice are resonances, resonant frequencies that are attenuated, that have been silenced, okay, by the rest of the resonant energy in the universe. So the idea is that, you know, very close to the Big Bang, if the Big Bang happened, you can imagine this massive explosion or whatever that rang out in every possible frequency, in every field, right? And later over time, the sort of the more powerful frequencies of resonance begin to attenuate these other less powerful ones or whatever. They decay. So it was like, my idea was that these particles that they're finding are actually notes, so to speak, that are no longer ringing out in the universe. They've been attenuated. So they're just creating new vibrations that have existed in the past at some point, or that might exist today, depending on the circumstances. Like, there might be these quote unquote particles inside, you know, freaking neutron stars or whatever. We don't know because we can't study that stuff. But in the normal environment that we're in, those notes are not present.
Right.
And so that was kind of a prediction that the elastic universe hypothesis, like following the logic of that. And then this guy, I'm listening to him, and he's basically describing exactly that in the latest quantum mechanics, quantum physics, is that's the model. That we are basically made up of a bunch of little resonating pockets in various different fields.
What are the fields?
I don't know.
No one knows. Does he know?
No, but you know, they call them fields, whereas like the old way of talking about it was the ether. Right. And they talked about the ether as being one field.
Right.
And so the theory now is that there are multiple fields. So it would be like in our atmosphere, we have the medium of air. And so we can hear sound. We can transmit sound waves in that field, but also light can pass through because there's another field that's smaller, made up of smaller interconnecting whatever the medium is made of. I don't know. No one really knows. But like light waves pass through that, and they are running into the larger things in the air molecules and being diffused. So it's like these fields sort of permeate everything, and they only interact with each other on some minute frequency range or something. So that you can get, say a resonance in the Higgs field, and it will not interact with anything else unless it's a high enough amplitude. Then it might, begin to interact with another one of the fields that could have quarks in it or Plancks or whatever, some other. That's kind of the way I understand it. I'm not really sure. But
what does he think of like unified field theory?
Well, that's what they're searching for. They're basically like, well, I guess not exactly that. They're searching for a way to unify basically all
Quantum
of
and classical mechanics.
Yeah. And gravity's the big one. Like nobody, they still don't
Yeah.
know how that works. But I don't know. It's not really a unified field, I think, is the idea is that it is multiple fields. It's a lot of fields.
Yeah.
And we don't actually know how many there are.
Yeah.
But so, like, they found this is why they were looking for the Higgs boson. In other words, what they're really saying is we're going to try to create a resonance in a theoretical field.
Yeah.
That we, doing all the math and doing all this theoretical crap, we were assuming there had to be some field like this in order for it to be able to decay into these other fields, into resonances in these other fields. So if we get high enough energy and we can get that field to actually resonate, we should see the decays through these other fields into these other particles or into these whatever. And that's kind of what they basically found, what they theorized. So that's, people think of it, or I've heard it being talked about in terms of the Higgs field is what gave particles mass.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think that language is even right.
No.
And that's another thing that Sean Carroll talks about, is that it's kind of sad that so many physicists and scientists that talk about quantum mechanics don't really understand it and didn't take the time to really study it.
Yeah.
And so there's been so much sort of disinformation, I guess, about it because of the lack of the ability to describe it properly.
Yeah.
So it's been kind of confused, and he claims that, like, and he's written some books about it, and his whole goal is to get. He thinks that, like, any layman can understand quantum mechanics. It's not, some ridiculously not understandable thing, which is what it's made out to be, because the people that have been discussing it, the authority figures that have been discussing it, never took the time to really try to understand it. So I love that about this guy. Like, the way he describes that area of physics is great.
But he believes in the many worlds. Like, he's a follower of that.
Yeah, he says his favorite theory is the many worlds theory. Right.
Yeah.
But he always says, like, not everybody agrees with me. You know, I'm not. This is, and it's not, he treats it like he likes the idea.
Right.
It's not
They're basically like the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment. The cat is alive in one world and dead in the other. And that both things happen. Yeah.
And that's another weird thing, is that, like, that's all about a spin. So there's like the particle can have a spin one way or a spin the other way, a clockwise spin or a counterclockwise spin.
Yeah. Like entanglement.
Yeah. And so once we measure it, and then I heard today, I think I was listening to it today, something about how one way he described measuring it was we don't really know how to describe what measuring it is.
Yeah.
Because they're not really sure what the interaction is that's allowing them to measure it. Like, that's the other thing. It's like, the way I interpret it is that what we cannot measure is what the interaction causes to happen, because we cannot see or measure any particle before an interaction.
Yeah.
It's impossible to measure anything without interacting with it.
Right.
So since we can't know its state prior to interacting with it, then the act of measuring it's not really understood what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and it changes the state.
It changes the state, and it can either be one or the other. And so, like, that seems to be fundamental on that level. Is it like the interaction between two of these resonances is sort of the fundamental way that the universe is built.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of a problem that we can't actually look at the building block
without running another building block into it.
without having. Yeah, so it's like you can't observe one brick. You can only look at the brick wall.
Yeah. To look at that brick, you have to throw another brick at it. It changes it.
Exactly. And I just think that's really cool. Like, this is one of the other things that kind of is similar to that, which is the idea of nucleation. We talked about that, like nucleation sites for crystals. So if you have a fluid, like let's say you have salt water, and you boil the water and you put as much salt in there as you can, you saturate it or whatever it's called, and then you let it cool off, and you're waiting for the salt to crystallize. And let's say you put it inside a very, very ridiculously smooth container. It has no sharp edges. And then you have some type of instrument where you can look down on the atomic level to see a single salt atom or molecule or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Nucleate, in other words, turn to crystal when it meets another one. When it meets another salt, what is it? Molecule. Yeah, so a better way of talking about it would be some, like diamond.
Yeah.
Carbon, right? There's no way to actually see or observe the nucleation site, because if you're looking so small that you're looking at a single atom,
It's probably not going to be the one that nucleates. Yeah.
and then you see it join with another atom and become a crystal, you can't be sure that that was the nucleation site.
Yeah.
Because you're not seeing all the other ones.
Right.
And there could have been one nearby that nucleated first and then the other one happened. So
Yeah.
no one really knows. There's no way to observe it. There's no way to be sure that we are observing a nucleation site or what conditions. It's all theoretical, basically. It's like,
we know it happens.
we know it happens, and you can get close, but you can never be sure that you're actually seeing the atom that becomes the nucleation site.
It's the same with decay. Like, you can't predict a decay. You just know that some of them will,
Right.
over a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
You just don't know which ones. It's very interesting.
I just love that for some reason. I just love that kind of stuff. Like, those are the type of mysteries to me that, like, we have no answer for, and it's like
It's almost there is no possible answer for it.
right.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot observe the building block of the universe and see it in its natural state before it interacts with anything else.
Right.
Because in order to observe it, you must interact with it.
Yeah.
In which case, it is no longer that thing that you thought that you were looking for.
Right.
And it's like, I don't know, something about that kind of stuff in physics, to me, I know some people will probably laugh at this, but it implies some type of sense of humor.
Yeah.
To me, you know? Somebody's playing a joke on us, mate. I just think that shit is cool, dude. So...
Yeah, that is cool.
And I think that we've taken a long break from, deep diving into the elastic universe idea. And I kind of am wanting to revisit it because there were, it was such a huge thing we did for years. We just we're talking about this all the time and running through all these standard model ideas and comparing it. And there was just so much, and we didn't really document it.
Yeah.
But the more I learn about little things about physics here and there, the more I'm just reminded of it. Like, God, I need to go back and revisit that whole thing. Like, after we looked into the electric universe and all of these different ideas. And that's the other great thing about the state of physics right now to me, is that we have, before quantum physics really took hold and became a big part of the conversation, any alternative idea would be scoffed at. We've already got it figured out.
Yeah.
And so now that this is like the prevailing model of the universe right now, quantum field theory, it's you can tell it hasn't really percolated out into the main, discussion about physics.
Yeah.
There's basically one guy talking about it, as far as I know, and it's Sean Carroll. Anyway, we got to take a break. Went a little bit long. Sorry about that. And we'll come back and talk about resonating snakes, maybe a little bit. Brothers of the Serpent podcast here in the 10 by 10 by 10 quantum cube of tangents. Yeah, so I don't know if any of that made any sense at all, but I think it's really cool. I had one other thing I want to add. The idea of quantum entanglement.
Well, I can tell you there's like one universe in which I understand it and another one where I don't. And I might be in the second one. But I won't know until you throw a brick at me. You got to throw a brick at me and figure it out.
I'm not claiming to understand it. These are just thoughts that I have, just playing scenarios out in my brain that maybe are true. I don't know. But, I had this idea about quantum entanglement. So if these fields, like think of the field as a liquid crystal.
Thinking of it like a soccer field.
Okay, that's fine too. As long as it's made of crystals.
A soccer field made of crystals. Okay.
So there's like we don't know what the fields are made of, right? They think that they talk about the Higgs field as though it's made of Higgs bosons, but it's not.
Yeah.
A Higgs boson is a disturbance in that field.
Yeah.
And we know about other fields that, we can have this disturbance, in an electron field around the nucleus of an atom or whatever. And then when it's energized, the electron cloud sort of jumps out, jumps back. These are ways of describing it that are not necessarily perfectly accurate. Yeah. But the idea that this electron shell jumps out and then goes back in and releases this particle called a photon, which propagates out as a particle or as a wave. It's like, we're not really sure. But the idea is that these fields can act like a medium of air, where if you get a disturbance, it can propagate waves that go out in every direction, right?
Yeah, and the jumping shells acts like resonant changes.
Yeah, like a pulse that a pulse that can
like energy can build up and it'll stay where it is until a certain point, and then it just bam, it's out there. It's like a resonant change.
Yeah, like a harmonic change.
A harmonic shift, yeah.
So waves can be propagated through the fields. And also the fields can have sort of self-contained resonant pockets or whatever you would say. Like it's not propagating waves out in 3 dimensions every direction. It's like this contained resonance. So once the amplitude is high enough, it can propagate a wave out. So if it was like a liquid crystal, if each field was sort of like a liquid crystal, where there were lattices, there were ways that the field fit together in a geometric pattern. Yeah. And you had, let's say, let's just take the simplest form, like this field is not resonating anywhere. And you create a resonance, a little pocket of resonance in one area and a pocket of resonance in another area, that those two could become entangled through the crystal lattice of the rest of the field, so that when you altered the position of one, then the other one would act accordingly or whatever.
I got you.
I think that's pretty cool. But I don't know. Still just like interested in quantum physics. Don't really know, but
that crystal idea makes sense in terms of entanglement.
Yeah.
It's strange that entanglement works through the noise of all the other particles too.
But still, there is information everywhere, right? So the fact that two resonant pockets in two totally different areas can be entangled depends on all the information between.
What about superposition?
I'm not sure. The superposition is the idea that comes about because of the fact that we can't measure it without interacting with it, so that it can be both before we do it. Mm-hmm. And so once we do it, it becomes one, but the other one also exists in the future. That's a theory.
Yeah.
So the superposition is the fact, or the idea that it is both spinning this way and spinning the other way before we interact with it. Mm. And I don't think that's right. I think this is why I don't subscribe to the many worlds theory, because that's interesting to think about, but I don't really think that's the way it works. I think that it depends on the nature of the interaction, which one it becomes. And it's really hard to give probability when we can't observe the thing before we interact with it. We can't measure it before.
Well, not when they're quantum, but people have done this with macro objects too.
In what way?
Remember we talked about the study the guy did where he took a macro object. It was he called it a sliver of metal. And he there was a TED talk that he did on this whole thing, basically. So this is incredibly dumbed down because it's a 20-minute TED talk and he's trying to describe this quantum stuff. But he basically put it in a vacuum, took it down to almost absolute zero, wrapped it in a Faraday cage so that it didn't have any noise around it. Right? And it was part of a circuit. It was a piece of metal that was part of a circuit. He said it was microscopic, but it's still a macro object.
Yeah.
Made of many, many, many billions of atoms of this metal. And that it was part of a circuit. So that was how they were interacting with it. Uh-huh. Okay. And they had basically cooled it down and pulled all the air out and put it in a Faraday cage. So it was absolutely still. It was in an absolute zero state where it was not vibrating.
Yeah.
And then they pinged it with a laser. And then they were getting the information that it was both vibrating and not vibrating at the same time. It was in a superposition.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'd have to look into that. But what I do know is that the language that is used to talk about quantum mechanics is really, you got to be careful.
Yeah.
Because the way, this is one of the things that gave rise to the whole, consciousness affecting things on the quantum level was the original language that they used to describe the problem that they were having when they were trying to look at objects in the quantum level.
Yeah, I know.
So it's it changes when we look at it. It knows that we're looking, and it's well, you're not actually looking. It's a machine detecting.
Yeah.
And it's, that stuff has been kind of cleared up. And I'm not suggesting or saying that consciousness is not connected to, on the quantum level. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just that it's not.
Because people can change the random number generators. So.
Yeah. It's not in the way that they were describing. These were a bunch of people who actually were having trouble even understanding what they were doing.
Yeah.
Originally when they were talking about it. And we've come a long way now from that, and those things have been explained better, right? And you have to realize that even talking about atoms and what the things are doing around an atom and all of that stuff is, they're almost like metaphors or something for what the math is telling them,
Yeah.
They're not little balls with little other balls orbiting around them like a solar system. It's not really like that.
Yeah.
We don't know what the shapes of them are. It's very hard to figure out what their geometry is.
Yeah.
because we can't see where they are.
Yeah.
It's like you can't figure out where it is, and you're not sure if you're actually going to interact with it at all when you try to measure it.
Yeah.
So the way they really like the way they talk about it with each other is wave functions, and like the wave function collapsing is what happens when they go to measure it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's anyway. We can move on from that. That's one of the things that's could be a whole segment that I thought wouldn't actually be a whole segment that I was thinking about.
But it still is like, why is the wave function collapsing? You're saying it's because of the way that they're trying to measure it. But they're trying to interact with it. This is the point. Nothing would be interacting with it if the consciousness wasn't there to interact with it. So the consciousness is in some way directing the interaction, which then collapses the wave function.
Well, I mean, we're directing it's like if you set up a machine to shoot a laser at something to measure that thing or its speed or whatever.
Yeah.
When the quote unquote photons, these other things that we don't really know what they are because we're trying to measure another one over there, interact with each other, we can't tell they're not in the same state anymore because we just hit it with a hammer or whatever.
Right.
It's like
because the consciousness wanted to hit it with a hammer.
yeah, I mean, but they're doing it all the time anyway, right? Without us trying to do it. It's just that when we go to actually see what's happening already.
I'm just saying that philosophically, the point remains that consciousness changes the state of any quantum particle no matter what. You can't look at it without changing its state.
Yeah, but we're not looking at it with our consciousness. We're looking at it with a tool.
That we built with our consciousness.
Well, we built it with our bodies.
Your conscious mind has to envision the tool.
Yeah.
And then you enact that into the real world. And then you interact with the quantum particle and change its state.
Right, but what I'm saying is without our consciousnesses doing anything, these particles are interacting with each other all the time. Anyway.
How do you know that? You can't see them without interacting with them.
Well, I mean, there's if everyone died, would the whole universe disappear?
It's like the tree in the forest question.
Yeah. Sure.
If everything that was conscious died, would the universe still exist?
I don't know, because the universe might be conscious.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
I'm just saying that the language that they use is what gave rise to this idea, because before anyone discovered quantum physics, nobody was talking about consciousness interacting on the quantum level.
Right.
Right. So we are trying to figure out how physics works, and we figure out that there's more going on than what we thought before. And then we start to build machines to try to study all that stuff. And then the language being used to describe what we're finding when we study it gives rise to this whole thing that, like, when we look at it, it changes.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
I'm also saying that that's not the only reason that gave rise to that, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. But that's what my point is. You have to be careful about the language being used. So I would have to look into that study is all I'm saying, like, and see what was, in my opinion, really going on, you know, based on what I've learned. Like,
yeah, you want to materialistalize it.
Well, I don't know what he means by it's both doing this and both.
No, I'm
doing
not talking
that.
about that study. I'm talking about the things where people can sit next to random number generators and change them.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's like you're not using any detector. Or,
exactly.
Yeah. Or
so it's
like,
an
why does
assumption that that's on the quantum level anyway. I mean, like anything that we do, you could say is on the quantum level. Like I'm moving particles around on the quantum level just by talking.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm interacting with the quantum level. We're all interacting with it. It is
which
the most fundamental aspect of physics that we know of. So everything that we do is on a quantum level.
Right, which gives rise to the question: why do people think that our consciousness can't interact with it?
I'm not saying that it can't.
I'm not saying you are, but I'm telling you that like most physicists are at least like quantum physicists are like not. They're like no, that's not what's happening.
Yeah, most of them
I'm putting this detector at it and it's changing stuff. I'm like, yeah, but you don't need that detector to change it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm fine with that. So we don't know how consciousness interacts with anything.
Right.
So it doesn't.
But it does.
Yeah, it's obviously interacting with things, and we don't know how.
Right. And it seems to.
So it's a perfectly fine thing to suggest that it interacts on the quantum level.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it doesn't. I'm just saying that the idea that
arose from the double slit experiment. Yeah.
Two, like one photon hitting another photon, and those two states that they were in before they collided, and then when they collide, they change their state, does not imply that we did it with our mind.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's just the natural state of interacting particles on the quantum level, is that they change their states when they interact. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so I just think that's great that we have this problem where, you get down to this certain level and it's like looking at it is destroying it.
Yeah.
There's no way to measure it without completely altering the way its size and everything about it.
Yeah.
It's cool. I love that kind of stuff. So
it also reminds me of the guy who put his consciousness in the path of a laser. Remember that study?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was nothing that was messing up that laser except for his consciousness. It dimmed it like 20% or something like that.
Yeah.
Like those photons started running into something that wasn't there before.
Yeah. And I mean, there's plenty of stuff about people who can move things around on the, the macro level.
Yeah.
Poltergeist.
There is no spoon.
Yeah.
And that's true. There isn't a spoon. It's just a bunch of quantum shit.
Yeah. It's just a bunch of resonating fields.
Right. You just have to raise the spoon's vibration. That's all you have to do. I mean, talk about language that's been messed up. You need to raise your vibrations. Like, there's plenty of that. So I have these other mass disappearances I was looking at while you and Brett were talking about physics.
Well, we're out of time. Sorry.
Oh.
No, I went long on the last.
That was
segment,
a mass disappearance of time. Then.
It was my fault. Keep going.
Okay, so I was like, I know that there's other stuff besides the plane in that village, and there is. This was interesting. I hadn't heard this one before. Another curious account of disappearing settlement is that of the village of Rio Verde in Brazil. On February 5th, 1923, a group of visitors to this small hamlet of 600 people were amazed to discover that there was not a soul to be found anywhere in the town, and homes and other buildings had been abandoned with great haste, with personal belongings and food left behind as is. Authorities launched an investigation but could find no sign of where any of the inhabitants had gone. The only clues left behind were a single gun that had been recently fired and a message scrawled on a blackboard that read, "There is no salvation." Theories of what happened to the over 600 vanished residents range from the plausible notion that they were forced to evacuate due to attacks from roving guerrillas or drug dealers to the more far-out idea that they were abducted by aliens, but there is unfortunately very little evidence to make any conclusions in the case of Brazil's vanishing village. So that's another interesting one. Like,
How many people was it?
600, over 600 people. Dang. And like the idea that they
went off into jungle to make drugs.
Yeah. It's like, I think 600 people running away from drug dealers would make a lot of trail.
Yeah.
So I don't know about aliens either, but it's just strange. Joining the ranks of bizarre mass disappearances are those of large amounts of soldiers that, for reasons left unexplained, have vanished without a trace. Perhaps the most well-known of these cases is that of the mysterious disappearance of the Roman 9th Legion. Formed originally in and around 65 BC, the 9th Legion was the most ruthless and greatly feared fighting force in the Roman Empire's military, consisting of around 5,000 of the empire's most skilled and highly trained fighting men, pulled from a variety of countries. By the 2nd century AD, the extremely well-armed, highly trained army of the 9th Legion had laid waste to enemies in far-flung locales as far and wide as Africa, Germania, Spain, the Balkans, and Britain, and were instrumental in maintaining Rome's iron grip across its vast empire. Indeed, in the 2nd century AD, the 9th Legion was at the tip of the spear that Rome was trying to drive into an insurgence from untamed, rampaging tribes of painted-faced barbarians churning within Britain at the time, the Celts.
Freedom!
It was conflict that would test Rome's might, as it was suffering great losses here against barbarian hordes and struggling to keep Britain under its control. In particular, under the reign of Emperor Hadrian, AD 117 to 138, the Romans were losing large numbers of soldiers to the bloody battlefields of Britain, and the whole engagement was so extremely worrying to the leaders in Rome that they would even eventually erect a huge wall called Hadrian's Wall to keep the enemy out. It was into this horrific maelstrom of fighting and turmoil that the 9th Legion marched in around 109 AD, when they pushed forth into what is now known as Scotland, to face an enemy that terrified most soldiers, with their primitive face paint streaked across fierce visages, attire of ragged bear and wolf skins over substantial bear flesh even in the middle of winter, fierce tattoos, booming war drums, and their mystical shamans howling prayers to the ancient Celtic gods in the midst of battle. These barbarians were seen as a ruthless enemy, the likes of which no one had ever seen before, yet the 9th Legion bravely marched forth to engage and push them north. This vast force of heavily armed soldiers would go forth to engage and would never be seen again. Thousands of men gone without a trace, not a single one ever to be accounted for. So they've never found any of them, none of their armor, none of their artifacts.
Whoa.
Like 5,000 dudes of the most badass army that Rome ever made, like marched into Scotland and vanished without a trace. And they've never been found.
Oh, my God. Oh, man.
Let's see. Yeah, so he talks about how they made movies about it. Okay, a similarly baffling vanishing of an entire military force is said to have occurred in China sometime around the year 1937. This was during the Second Sino-Japanese War, when China was about to be subjected to the abject cruelty and barbarity of what has come to be known ominously as the Rape of Nanking, in which invading Japanese forces in the then Chinese capital city of Nanjing, now Nanking, over a 6-week period in 1937, mercilessly massacred an estimated 40,000 to over 300,000 civilians in an orgy of killing, looting, and widespread rape. In the days leading up to this tragic stain on history, Chinese Colonel Li Fuxin had been engaged in a desperate effort to staunch the coming invasion by placing 3,000 heavily armed reinforcement troops along a 2-mile line in order to defend a major strategic bridge over the Yangtze River, or Yangtze, where they waited for the inevitable Japanese onslaught. The defensive line set up artillery and heavy guns in the hopes of unleashing them upon their ruthless enemy, and the colonel himself fell back to his headquarters to await the attack he knew was coming. And they have an old picture of the Japanese troops in Nanking. The following morning, the colonel was awoken by an aide who brought news that all contact with the defensive position had been lost. Baffled, he had an expedition launched to the line to check on their current situation, and this is where things got bizarre indeed. When the investigation team arrived, it became apparent that the entire line of over 3,000 men was simply and totally gone. Posts were completely abandoned, and artillery and heavy guns had been left where they were, fully loaded, locked in firing positions, but dead and unused. There was no sign of blood or struggle of any kind, indeed no sign at all as to where everyone had gone at all. It was as if the men had just blinked out of existence. 2 sentries far away at the end of the bridge were still at their posts and claimed that no one had come through that way. In fact, there were several sentry posts set up throughout the area, and none had seen any sort of movement from the large force of men.
Whoa.
How could they have silently and stealthily have moved without any word to their superiors and without notice to these sentry posts? In the aftermath of the war, there were efforts made to reach some closure to what had happened to the 3,000-plus armed men, but Japanese records held no hint as to their ultimate fate, and it remains a perplexing, unsolved mass disappearance to this day. Considering that the Japanese have done everything in their power to cover up and hide the various atrocities committed in China during the war, it is highly likely that we will never know for sure what happened to these troops. That doesn't make any sense. Nobody came through, and they didn't get killed. Why do you think Japan did it? Further weirdness came about in the following years when in 1945, a train carrying hundreds of passengers heading from Guangdong to Shanghai, China, failed to reach its destination, and intense searches turned up no trace of where the train or its people had gone. How do you vanish a train? The only thing turned up of note during the search for the train was an odd lake that had seemingly sprung up from nowhere. In November of the same year, a group of around 100 Soviet forces heading for a train station suddenly and inexplicably vanished en route. A subsequent investigation turned up a camp that had been halfway set up and a fire that had been put out, but no sign of where the men had gone.
Man, that's crazy.
They don't have it in here, but there's another one. Let's see. There was another one of a British. It's weird that he doesn't have. I thought for sure he would have it in there because he was talking about the military one. But there was another one of a British battalion that was watched. I can't remember what war it was, but they were marching in a field or whatever, and there was like a bank of fog, and they marched into the fog and never came out. And when the fog went away, they were gone, and they've never been found. It's like
That's just
Yeah,
wild.
and that was hundreds of men too. It's like the Roman one is in particular very strange. Like you would think after so much time that people would have found artifacts.
Yeah.
You know, that nothing has ever been found. The entire Ninth Legion has vanished from history.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and some people have said, well, you know, the Romans they didn't disappear. They just they got all transferred into other legions, but that doesn't make any sense because the Ninth Legion was like feared and known like across the empire as being badass. Like, why would they disband it and just put them into other, you know? So,
What is this?
oh, okay. So it was New Zealand. That's what he says. World War I. Members of the New Zealand Army Corps' First Field, Bay and Plain were wrapped in a strange mist on the afternoon of 21st of August, fighting under the British crown. So it was British soldiers. They were just from New Zealand. I was close to being right.
Thank you, Watcher.
Yeah, so I don't know what to think of those either. It's almost like it makes me think of the Mandela effect in some ways. That like sometimes the world shifts and some things don't make it into the new place we're in.
Have we talked about that ship that they sent out? I think Nikola Tesla might have had something to do with it.
Oh, the Philadelphia experiment?
Yeah.
I don't know if we've talked about that or not. That's a fascinating story too.
Yeah, that's really... Man.
The Navy, of course, claims that nothing like that ever happened, and the Philadelphia did not do any of the things that people said that it did. But yeah, supposedly they were. The idea was that Tesla had set up something on the ship to make it invisible to magnetic mines. It was a degaussing thing. So supposedly he set up all these massive magnets on the ship, and it was supposed to go out and test this, and they turned it on, and then it freaking disappeared. And there's a lot of wild stories that come out of that. People that, you know, that the ship came back and there were people that were like half sunk into the metal.
Yeah, and that reminds me of like the Hutchison effect, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You can like sink other objects into a metal block, and you're just like,
Yeah.
He must be interacting with that on the quantum level.
That's right. Must be vibrating that in the fundamental field.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, sometime we'll have to do a deep dive into the Philadelphia experiment, and then, of course, the related Montauk experiment that came later.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
Well, supposedly two of the guys from the Philadelphia experiment that disappeared entirely showed up at Montauk Base like 20 years later, thinking that they were, like, no time had passed for them.
Man, that's crazy.
And then that started up a whole new series of experiments because, of course, you know, they were like, wait, maybe they really did teleport. Yeah, the Montauk. Yeah, exactly. It was a portal.
Hey, guys, are we done with the experiment yet?
Yeah, wait. Are we on land? How did this happen? No, supposedly one of them was totally crazy. And if I remember correctly, I can't remember if this was from Philadelphia or Montauk, but there were military people that like spent the rest of their lives in psychiatric care after those experiments or whatever. You know, there were some guys that came back completely nuts that just couldn't handle whatever happened, screaming bloody murder. So
That's crazy.
yeah. So maybe sometime in the distant future, like 5,000 screaming Romans will show up somewhere and just, you know, you just have to wonder if like they...
And they'll get killed by a bunch of Inuits with no guns and no dogs.
Yeah. They'll run into those New Zealanders somewhere in Australia or something like that. It'll be weird. There's also the idea of, like people talk about aliens a lot, but there's the idea of of ancient races still living here underground. You know,
Yeah.
like I don't know if have you ever dug into the whole Dulce base thing?
No.
Well, the first thing about that I remember is like that the guy who talked about it, who really brought that into the public mind, I don't know if he was specific Dolce, but he was talking about doing military digs. Like he was an engineer. Probably he was part of Project Paperclip. So he was brought over after World War II. He was a German engineer that was brought over, and he was like a mining expert. You know, so he was specialized in digging underground and making giant bunkers and everything like that. And he had done this for the Third Reich. So he was good at like digging into certain kinds of into any kind of rock and then fortifying it and making it into like an impregnable bunker, like basically a military thing. And he basically like when he was older, he started going around to different conferences and telling this story about how they had been digging an underground base somewhere in New Mexico, if I remember correctly, and broke into a series of caverns that were already occupied by something not human.
Whoa.
And that there was basically a mini war because he was there with a bunch of military guys. They were in the process of digging, they were digging test holes, deep, massive test holes. And he like went down in one of the elevators and saw because they were like, hey, the boring machine like hit a cavity. So he went down to see what the deal was, to see, okay, crap, there's a cavern here, but maybe we can use it. And there was a bunch of things down in there. And the soldiers that were with him opened fire because the things were all armed and whatever. And there was this giant war that they lost. Okay. So he told that story, and a lot of people thought he was full of crap. No one believed him. But he was killed in his hotel room when he was on one of these conference tours. Somebody, like, garroted him, basically.
Man.
He was assassinated. And then they tried to pass it off as a suicide, like that he had hung himself. But it was an impossible suicide. Like, you can't hang yourself on your knees from your own chair, you know? Like, it was... when I dug into this, I actually saw some of the autopsy photos, and it's like one of those things you can't unsee. But the guy was killed by somebody from behind him with a wire.
Yeah.
So that, more than anything else, made me look at what he was saying more seriously, because I'm like, okay, he got killed for, somebody like killed this guy.
Yeah.
For some reason, and he had.
Well, it's like this UFO guy.
Yeah.
Like
he's like, hey,
somebody's after me.
Right.
I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
If something happens, investigate.
Right.
And then he dies. Puke black blood.
Yeah.
And then his computer comes back wiped.
Somebody put polonium in his sushi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we ever die, investigate.
That's right. And on that note, I think we're done for this week. If we don't come back next week, investigate.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Yep. Thank you guys very much. We love you. Thanks to The Watcher for keeping us on the straight and narrow. Thanks to Laura for all the intros. Thanks to Kyle and Ty for all the music. Thanks to Kyle for all the production. And thanks to all of you listeners.
And thanks to Russ for all the content.
All the giant amounts of missing people. All right, guys. Good night, Adamu. Get back to work.
I'm going to turn the computer off with my consciousness. Okay. I'll use my...